Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hi, everyone. This is Tammy Patzer, and I'm really excited to introduce today's guest, Ken Bator. Ken has more than 20 years of experience in helping organizations reach new levels of effectiveness by aligning their brand, culture, and strategy. He is the author of the Pocket Guide to Strategic Planning, the 90-Day Quick Fix for the Business Owner or Manager, and he's also the author of the Formula for Business Success equal B+C+S. And we're going to take a deep dive into the formula in just a minute. He was born and raised in Chicago, and he earned a Bachelor of Science degree in finance, and he has an MBA in entrepreneurship from DePaul University. Welcome. Ken, are you there?
Yep. Yeah, I lost you there for a second. Thank you, Tammy. Really looking forward to talking to you and being on your show.
I'm really excited about it too. And let's dive right in and tell me more about the formula for success, B+C+S.
Certainly. Well, I like to joke that when I went through college and got all those degrees that you were just talking about, I was never one of those guys that could study for like a whole 5 minutes and then get an A+ in school. I was one of those guys that had to work pretty hard for that B- that I got, so I could understand why other people can't understand or have trouble understanding. So I created the formula for myself in business years ago to try and figure out how all these things fit in. For example, in the 90s when I was in the corporate world, I would run to a seminar about empowerment, and I would pick up a book about reengineering and maybe read an article on Six Sigma. And I always thought, in and of itself, this is a great concept, but how do we align and put all these things together? In other words, if I wanted to empower my team and also do reengineering at the same time, couldn't I do that? And what eventually came up in my head was that everything seemed to fall in one of three buckets: either branding, culture, or strategy. Or in other words, as I say with my clients, we're answering three very critical questions to our business. One, for branding, what's the image we want to promote out in the public? For culture, what's the experience we need to create both for and through our employees? And the strategy, how do we drive more of the right business to our business? And that became my B+C+S formula.
Okay, so B stands for brand, right? And the C is the culture, and S is strategy. Okay, I get it, because that was the main thing. And it's funny when you mentioned about all of the letters, and sometimes we don't quite understand. So you actually do branding, culture building, and strategic planning for businesses. So when you discovered this, how did you determine that these were the things that were important that you would focus on?
Great question. Originally, when I started my consulting business almost 20 years ago, I'm only 25, so I was a child prodigy, if you could actually believe that. But when I started this almost 20 years ago, originally the services that I offered were in the branding, marketing, and sales realm, because that was largely my background in my executive job. And then it very, very quickly morphed into also offering strategic planning, because I found in a lot of the trade publications that I wrote in, it would attract CEOs to come to me and say, we really need somebody to facilitate our strategic planning retreat. Can you do that? And the first time I got that call, it was, sure, I could absolutely do that. And I hung up the phone and I thought, how the hell do I do strategic planning? But fortunately, I had been exposed to that process as an executive and found that a lot of my branding curriculum fit into being able to facilitate strategy sessions as well. And then it quickly came to light that whether it was a client that I was working on enhancing their brand and or a client that I was building their strategic plan, the biggest obstacle to either implementation of the strategy or really and truly enhancing the brand was almost always the culture. From a branding standpoint, we could do a lot of things that can create visual and messaging that's going to drive more of the right business to their business. But if they get a terrible experience that doesn't match that brand that we put out there, they're not going to get any repeat customers. They're going to end up dying. Same thing with strategy. Many times we would create this terrific strategic plan that was very on point, very niche-oriented, made a lot of sense for the business. And then we would go back after this retreat, after this plan was created, and there'd be little to no implementation or execution because the culture wouldn't support it. They didn't have employees that bought in to the business mission, that didn't buy into the strategy and the growth that this business wanted to do. They weren't connected to management. So it became very clear early on from a consulting and training standpoint that I needed to incorporate the C in this B+C+S formula in order to truly move my clients forward. Because as I like to say, without the C, all you've got is BS, and that's not a good thing.
That's actually true. So who are your clients? Are you working mainly with big corporations, small business, mom and pops, or individual entrepreneurs? Who are your ideal clients and customers?
Mm-hmm. Great question. The short answer is I've worked with all of those sectors that you've mentioned. The ideal clients for Bator Training and Consulting are between 5 and about 250 employees. That 5 might be ma and pa. That 250 employees might be a little bit bigger with multiple branches or locations and so forth. But generally, businesses between 5 and 250 employees, that is a service-based business. And what I mean by that are businesses where the experience is as or more important than the actual product. So places such as banks, restaurants, hair salons, real estate firms, hospitals, healthcare, and so forth, where the people, may go there for a meal, for instance. Restaurants are a good example. But if the meal is terrific, but the experience has been poor, service has been bad, tables are crappy, TVs aren't put in the right place, there isn't the right music or lighting, even though they might have had great food, the experience was poor, so they won't go back there. I've seen several places, to keep with the restaurant analogy, that has offered, average or slightly above average food, but everything else has been so warm and welcoming, people keep coming back.
It's interesting that you brought up those examples, because I have been in restaurants where the food was really good, but the service was really poor, or just something about the attitude was wrong, and I won't go back. Mm-hmm. And then there's also, like you said, the experience. And like, for example, Amazon is a big, giant company, and yet
right.
people seem to appreciate the experience. And so, like you said, serving all these, from mom and pop all the way up, you spend a lot of time, you actually do a B+C+S audit when you start working with someone. And culture today, I would imagine, is something that we really do have to pay attention to, because like you said, without the C, all you have is the BS, because of business strategy and that brand. If you don't have the people working together and that buy-in. I used to be in the newspaper business, and I remember they would try to get us to do things from the top down, but when you're in the trenches, it's like, that's ridiculous. Well, why would you make us do that when it doesn't make sense for what you're expecting us to do every day? So talk a little bit more about, how do you create this cool culture in a business? Because I think that's probably one of the things that people don't talk a lot about in general.
Yes. And yes, you mentioned the B+C+S audit. That's basically, in essence, a brand audit that many ad and advertising and marketing firms use to really delve into the image and what the company is all about. So my B+C+S audit is kind of a brand audit on steroids, where we also dig into elements in the culture as well as the strategy. But to get back to culture, because you asked a terrific question of how do we get to, as I put it, a cool culture corner? How do we get to a place where we have something that's positive and we can be proud of? And I truly believe that today the key word is involvement. And you alluded to it in your example from the newspaper business, is when things are just simply pushed down from management and you're forced to just comply all the time. It's very, very difficult to create a positive morale where people actually want to come to work. Today, especially with so many great millennial executives and entrepreneurs and professionals, they want to be involved. And I think, today we've come a long way in terms of culture building. Back in the 90s, when I first started in business and I was working for a large bank in the Illinois area, everything was about communication. There were books on communication, which basically, along the lines of what you alluded to in the newspaper, we're going to communicate everything that we're doing. This is going to be pushed down to you. You're not going to like it. You have no say about it, but damn it, we're going to communicate every annoying, irritating thing that's going to happen to you along the way. So everybody knows what's happening, but you're not necessarily happy about it or have any input to be able to change it. And then, over the last, I'd say like 10 years or so, maybe longer, especially coming out of the Great Recession, everything was about engagement, going from just plain communication to engagement. And engagement to me is like, all right, we're going to ask for your opinion. We may or may not take it or not, but we're going to say, this is the problem we're dealing with. Maybe this is how we're going to fix it. Can you give us some input? Can you maybe talk about, what you think about it? By the way, we're going to have this big picnic for all your families, and we're going to call it engagement. And granted, that was better than my communication example, but engagement was just another level. Today, we truly need to get to involvement. What involvement looks like is, we've got this problem. You four people are the experts at this. Here's the budget. Here are the tools and parameters for you to fix the problem or for you to create this new opportunity in our business. If you need help, you come to us, but this is your project. You're truly involved from the ground level on creating something yourself. And I'll give your audience the number one tip I give everybody, whether they're a client or simply asking me, what is the number one tip you can give? And it relates directly to involvement, is create service standards from the ground up. Have your staff, especially your frontline staff, and those are the people serving your customers as well as serving your internal customers, the other employees, create service standards themselves. Allow them to do that, because then there's complete involvement from the beginning and you get buy-in right from the start, rather than just simply communicating or engaging. I truly believe that the key to creating a cool culture corner, as well as the whole that whole B+C+S formula, is the creation of service standards and adhering to them.
It's interesting because, you're talking about businesses that may be, like you said, mom and pop, brick and mortar, or they could be online. But that advice actually goes very well for an entrepreneur who may be having to deal with the service standards related to their family, supporting what they're doing. And if you create these standards of the way things are and have that communication and that implementation, I can see how that could work at many levels. And I look back at when I was in middle management at the newspaper, I was perfectly capable of coming up with all kinds of systems and ideas that streamlined, and I actually did, but I didn't get the support or appreciation part of it. I just got do that, and then they would screw me over on the money. It was,
right.
Where I didn't get the raise they promised, and so I finally left, even though they implemented all these ideas and systems that worked for the company that actually made them a lot of money, yet for some reason they disconnected it from me. I have a question related to your Better Business Strategy, because I want to give everybody a little taste of the you have some strategic implementation ideas that you can use immediately. Can you share one or two of those?
Well, in terms of strategy, it all comes from the foundation. Brand, culture, and strategy, I believe, are completely interconnected. To backtrack just for 1 second, and then I'll answer your question. Okay. So people know what a service standard is. A couple of examples are: we will greet the customer when he or she walks through the door. We will resolve problems within 24 hours. We'll answer the phone within 3 rings. And if you do that properly to build a culture, it bleeds into branding and strategy from a number of different areas. From branding, and the reason I'm such a proponent of service standards, when I worked at that large financial institution in Illinois, our very first advertising campaign we ever did was based on those service standards that we had. And the reason we did that is because we were able to brand the experience that we already offer. So when we did the advertising and we had that strategy to go into these new markets, we knew that we could live by those standards because we were already doing it. So from that standpoint, we were able to brand exactly who we were already. So when somebody called, they were going to get an answer on the phone within 3 rings, and have that experience right from the start. So from strategy implementation, as you asked, you really have to look at who you are to begin with. A lot of times when I do strategic planning, before we get into goals or growth initiatives and things of that nature, we look at organization drivers such as the service standards, such as mission statements and vision statements, so that we know that we're going to create goals that we're actually going to execute on. I'll give you a perfect example from a strategic planning session I did just 2 weeks ago. is we sat on the board and we came up with all these different goals, whether it was to be a better community leader or to grow sales in a particular market, or build internal infrastructure through our employees. And as I was doing the report, in order to encapsulate everything that we did on the planning session, I found that every goal and initiative that these folks created, I didn't create anything. I just cajoled them to be able to put these out on the white paper. And I found that every single initiative aligned perfectly with one of their company values. So if you're truly looking at those organization drivers, mission, vision, values, and using that as the foundation for your strategic plan, then you're going to find it's so much easier to implement those particular strategies and initiatives because they're already part of you. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it's interesting because the language you use business language, and I'm processing as you go because a lot of our listeners are business people, but then also I have people who are just starting to get into business. But everything you're talking about has a lot of value because we all have to look at exactly, branding, culture, and strategy. And again, it doesn't matter if you're a little business or a big business. These are all things that will help you to grow a business that will attract your ideal clients and customers in the future.
Well, and the nice thing is, it seems daunting. But again, I'm one of those guys that was never the brightest bulb on the tree. I was able to learn because I worked hard and gained knowledge and wisdom, not because, I was naturally this sharp tack. So I can understand why an entrepreneur, has trouble understanding. And so at the end of the day, when you're a small business or you're just starting out, so a lot of these things are even easier to create. Once you have like 200, 250 employees and creating a brand culture strategy that's aligned, it's certainly not impossible, but there's a lot more steps that need to be done. When you're just starting a business, or case in point, somebody that I was working with earlier that just has 6 employees, you can have an initiative, whether it's strategy or from a branding culture standpoint, and implement it immediately because you're a close-knit group. I had one group, as I mentioned, that has 6 employees that I worked with this morning. We created and implemented service standards in weeks. Now, with a 250 employee business, that could take months in order to do that properly. I encourage your audience that are solopreneurs, that are just starting a small business with 3 or 4 or 5 people. As you said, maybe it's a family business, to do some of these things, whether it's service standards or just really understanding what the why of your business is. There's a lot out there in terms of connecting to your why of your business. Even understanding the why we created this in the first place, because there was a need, because we were passionate about it. That in and of itself will get you on the right track quicker than businesses that don't do things of that nature.
I think you're really right. And also, while you're talking, I've been snooping through your website at btcinc.net. And one of the things that you have that's really phenomenal that everybody needs to know about is if you're somebody who is interested in branding, culture, and strategy, you have podcasts, you have blogs, and you have, of course, the books and video libraries. So you just have, a wealth of information for the taking right here on the website. Tell me a little bit more about your podcast and what people can learn from that.
Certainly. And thank you for asking, Tammy. I have a lot of content out there. It's a lot of fun for me to create. These days I'm not writing as many articles because I'm, excuse me, busy with the podcast and the video show. But the podcast concentrates on the C of the B+C+S formula. As we alluded to earlier, the name of it is Cool Culture Corner. And what we focus on is creating better involvement among our team so that we can have better productivity, better profits, and growth. And so from that standpoint, I either delve into a specific culture issue, one that I'm dealing with one of my clients possibly, or many times as a consumer, I'll go into a restaurant or bank or other service-based type of business and have a very positive or very negative experience, and I'll share that on the show. If it's a positive experience, I'm happy to talk about give the business name. If it's a negative experience, I almost never mention the name because the point isn't to disparage a business. It's simply to learn from somebody else's mistakes. So I usually keep that to myself. And then also from time to time, I have some great guests. Lately, we've had some guests that have dealt with making shift happen in your culture. We've dealt with happiness. We've dealt with creating a more positive perception in the workplace, and so forth. So I've been blessed to have some great guests and fellow thought leaders to join me lately on Cool Culture Corner.
That is really cool. And I'm looking at some of your titles, like how to deal with hijackals on your team. Do you feel the burn, and the burn in your culture is the BERN? and are the best places to work really the best places to work? All very thought-provoking titles. And so I'm sitting here going, okay, well, with all of these, that would take hours and hours to do. And I see that you have weekly business tips, which are really cool too, because again, little chunks of information, and I imagine it's like you can get an MBA in branding, culture building, and strategic planning just from going to your website. I mean, it's that. So, and again, I'm really telling everyone, because I'm looking at it, I'm just going, oh my goodness, you have so much high quality information and everything. And then also, I see that you have a free ebook, and is that the formula for business success equal B+C+S?
No, even better. It's actually, in essence, a sequel or prequel or supplement or whatever you want to call it to the book, The Formula for Business Success Equals B+C+S. That particular ebook, which is about a 16-page PDF, and it has pictures in it, so it's actually a very quick read. It's not, hours and hours, as you mentioned, from my other content to get through. But the name of that free ebook is When Your Formula Doesn't Add Up, and it gives scenarios if your culture and strategy are strong. For instance, how to improve your brand. Or if you do feel like your brand and culture is strong, but you just don't have things put together in an organized way, how to build a strategy. And also some tips, obviously, as we've talked a lot about today, if you feel that you have a great brand and you have a strategy, but the culture is the obstacle, some tips to implement right away to begin putting you on a path to a better culture. But that ebook, as you mentioned, is completely free. You can sign up for it at our website. And obviously, when you sign up for that particular ebook, you automatically get into the weekly email, which comes out every Monday or Tuesday with some of those tips from the content. So you get a double bonus of a free ebook and the weekly tips when you sign up.
Oh, super. I just signed up, so I'll be on your list. Because again, when your formula doesn't add up, we all need to think about the branding, the culture, and the strategy. It just makes so much sense to me that you're focusing on this, and having a formula or a system is always good, because that way you can go, 1, 2, 3, A, B. And when I said hours and hours of content, it's not like it's hours, it's chunked up into easy consumable. But I was just very impressed with the fact that somebody really could. I think if they looked at your website, they could go, wow, I really know a lot about the formula for business success because Ken Bator taught it to me. That's the beauty of your website, because it isn't just a brochure. It is a functional website that has real heavy duty good information on it, and you really don't see that a lot. I see a lot of websites, so I'm looking at this from a consumer point of view of it's like, yeah, I could really learn from this person, and think that if they're going to provide this type of information to me on a website, just think what he could do if he came and talked to me in person. That's what I'm thinking.
Thank you, Tammy. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I find that, and I truly, sincerely enjoy the content that I create and put out there. And it is a double bonus for me too, because I do realize that there are some folks that for whatever reason don't have the resources. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's time to work with a thought leader like me, but it allows me to steer them to the website and say, look, if you watch this video, if you read this article, and you listen to this podcast, it'll give you some help that you really need right now. And on the other end, I find on a fairly continual basis that I'll have somebody that's on our weekly tips and opens up the email for several weeks and months in a row, and then all of a sudden will send me that email or give me that call, which does my heart great, and says, I read this article, I watched this video, I listened to this podcast. This is the problem that I'm dealing with. How can I get you out here to help us a little bit more with that? And that always creates a very, very solid relationship before the personal conversation has even started. So it's been awesome for me.
Yes, and I think you got it, because, for example, you have videos on your website. I'm going to give a little marketing lesson while we're at it. The fact that you have the video on your website, you have a blog, you have testimonials, you have your books, you have resources, you give people every type of learning experience possible. And again, it's easy to access. Plus, you have the podcast, which is good, because that means that all of your information is going out into the globe, and people can access it, from the palm of their hand with a phone or from a computer. So if somebody wants to reach out, what would you suggest to them would be the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah, the best way is almost always email. I am blessed to have a number of great clients and be involved in a number of things. So I'm not always available by phone, although you certainly can call the number on the website, which is simply 714-681-2821, and I will get back to you personally. But I find that email is the perfect communication for me, because I'm always checking that at periods during the day. It may be the next day, it may be later in the evening, but if it's a client or potential client, I always get back to them. And that email is kbator, Bator, at btcinc.net.
Okay, perfect. Well, Ken, thank you so much. Like I said, I learned a lot, and it kind of made me start to think about all of the things, branding, culture, strategic planning, implementation, marketing. I just, my mind just started to go many places. So before I let you go, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is visit the website. If you go to the Contact Us page, which isn't very onerous, I think it asks for an email and a name, maybe even a business, and put in the comment section, strategy session. We will schedule you for a 15-minute complimentary strategy session on brand, culture, or strategy, since we can only get into one in 15 minutes. And we'd be happy to help anybody in your audience that way. And I will just leave you with, it seems like it may be a daunting task, but I guarantee you that once we really look at things from a brand, culture, or strategy bucket, things become a lot clearer pretty quickly.
Great. So just go to btcinc.net, and you can push the contact button, fill it out, and put in the notes strategy, and Ken will have a strategy session with you at no cost. That, I would say, that's a no-brainer to do because, again, you're talking to somebody who is a consultant to businesses, and this is what he does. And as you can tell from our conversation, this is what he lives, breathes, and speaks regularly. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And Ken and everyone, this is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.